I still remember kind of standing up in one of the meetings and really putting my feet down and saying that I am not willing to kind of let 20 people sit on their asses for the entire lockdown. You can go and sue me if you want.
Welcome to Backstage with Millionaires, the show where we bring you the stories of real Indian startups told by the entrepreneurs that built them. I'm Caleb Friesen, and on the show today, how Akshay Singhal turned his zero-revenue research lab into one of India's leading indigenous EV battery manufacturers. Building hardware is hard. This sentiment has echoed throughout India's startup ecosystem for years now, and it's one of the reasons why some of India's most successful startups build and sell software as a service, not hardware. The pre-existing ecosystem required to support hardware R&D and manufacturing is so nascent and underdeveloped compared to countries like the United States and China that Indian startups often have no choice but to import materials and technology from other countries. And this is what makes Log9 Materials so special. They're developing indigenous nanotechnology and battery products in India in spite of how difficult it is to do so. And Akshay Singhal, Log9's founder, didn't actually need to do this. He could have started up outside of India if he'd wanted to. Akshay was doing an internship in 2014 at the University of Alberta and probably could have stuck around in Canada like so many of India's most academically successful students do, but ultimately decided to return to India and begin a graphene startup, which he built in his family's warehouse. So definitely a step down in terms of facilities compared to U of A, but also a huge step up in terms of entrepreneurship. Akshay refurbished this warehouse into a makeshift laboratory and got to work developing his first product. What was this earth-shattering new technology? Well, it was a cigarette filter made of graphene. But then they also developed an innovative graphene oil spill cleanup pad, and both of these products were exciting for Akshay and his small team to work on, but it wasn't until Log9 began developing their aluminum fuel cells that this tiny graphene startup began to gain a bit of recognition. These aluminum fuel cells, or AFCs for short, generated a lot of media attention, and they also enabled the company to secure millions of dollars from some pretty big investors. And on paper, this concept of a commercial AFC looked pretty great. Firstly, aluminum as a fuel source is cheap and abundant here in India, unlike lithium, which had to be imported from other countries. Aluminum is also very safe to handle as compared to other alternative fuel sources like hydrogen, and unlike lithium-ion batteries or hydrogen fuel cells, AFCs have incredible range, upwards of 1,000 kilometers. Ultimately though, in spite of its advantages over existing EV battery and fuel tech, AFCs would prove to be a bit of a false start for Log9.
Fuel cell systems, whether it's hydrogen fuel cell or our aluminum fuel cell, have one biggest, compromise or limitation, which is of energy efficiency. So whether it's in the case of hydrogen, where you kind of use renewable energy to create green hydrogen, and then you take that green hydrogen to kind of put it in the fuel cell to run a vehicle or produce electricity back from it, the overall efficiency of this process is sub 20%. And it's a similar case with aluminum as well, where you can look at 30%, maximum 35% kind of efficiency. So it's very low. Batteries operate at a 90% plus round trip efficiencies. So while you have benefits of high operating temperatures, so you don't have to worry about tropical climate, you can refuel the system in a matter of seconds, so you don't worry about charging time. Your range is really huge. You can go for thousands of kilometers, right? But does it really make sense for every kind of electric application? I don't think so. Because if you can have something which is 90% plus efficient, then why use something which is 30% efficient? And most of our mobility needs are sub 100-200 kilometer requirement. The average trip distance in India is less than 30 kilometers, right? So from that perspective, why use something which is so inefficient? And that's where fuel cells are more relevant for long haul kind of applications, or as a stationary system where you require long-term power backup or energy storage for a long term or stuff like that. So all of that learning came in as we went more deeper on operationalizing and kind of taking it to market, the aluminum fuel cell technology, right? And as we were kind of discovering all of these facts and kind of getting attuned to them, the pandemic hit.
Yeah, the pandemic hits, and suddenly your team is not really able to convene in the same way, right? Having everyone under one roof kind of becomes impossible with the lockdowns happening across the country. And I think the way that this company was set up was very like collaborative in a physical way, right? Everybody does
Yeah.
need to come together and work in the lab and build these things. I mean, was there a point during the beginning of the pandemic where you thought we're in big trouble here?
Yeah, it was. I actually, but it didn't last very long. It was a challenge that how would we really work? What will we really do sitting at home, and how much planning or how much simulations can you really do, right? But luckily, it didn't last very long. Overall, across multiple lockdowns, all put together, we would have sat at home maximum for 40 days across 2 years, 3 years kind of a time period. So I think it's far smaller, and most of that came in the second lockdown, which was really challenging because people were dying out there, right? So in the first lockdown, we sat home for 3 days, right? While there was a lot of, so to say, pressure from the board as well to kind of just cut costs and be more nimble and maybe fire people we don't need and kind of leave away offices which we don't need and like the usual what was going on.
Prepare for
Like,
the worst.
prepare for the worst, like embrace, and it's already going down and stuff like that. But I was not comfortable with kind of letting people go or kind of cutting those corners and doing all of that. And we said that let's see what we can do with a bunch of people and resources that we have. And what we really knew to do is to create products and create technologies and kind of do it for the first time in India, and that's what we did. Right. So I still remember we were just I think over a Google Meet call or something. We were not using Zoom earlier. For some reason, we were using Google Meet, and I, Pankaj, and Karthik were just different in our own houses. We were kind of just having a drink over a Google Meet, and Pankaj said, "Oh, I read about something called UV rays and UV disinfection, and you can use UV to kind of kill germs, and it kills bacteria and viruses very efficiently. And I'm thinking of creating a small this thing for my home so that whatever stuff I'm getting in, I can clean it, and so that my family is not affected." And it was more of a hack for your own family rather than a product idea at that time. And that was I still remember the 24th of March 2020, because in the morning we had our board meeting and we were just chilling in the evening. And we had heard in our board meeting that, oh, cut costs, let go of people, and all of that thing was happening. And then we were just discussing in the evening, and I said, why do it only for your home? Why can't we do this for the entire country? And that's how the Corona oven or the UV disinfection journey started at that time. 3 days in, we had the product roadmap, we had the simulations done. Fourth day, we went back to the offices. So 28th of March, we were back in office. We had the prototypes on 30th of March. And by 11th of April, we had the first lot going out of our partner factories, right? Obviously, we couldn't have set up a factory in that time period, so we depended a lot on contract manufacturers. And by the end of April, we had 6 factories in Bangalore making that product. So I think that was breakneck speed. Like by mid-May, we had 140 retailers in India selling our product. There was nobody else who had launched it. We had bought all inventory of UV lights in the country, and people were really surprised. So we called up, I still remember we called up Philips that we want to buy UV lights. And they were like, why do you need UV lights? Because so UV lights so far have in India have been used for water purifiers, right? And there was no other major use case of that. And there was like all water purifier companies are actually sending back their inventory to us. And you are the first ones calling and asking for large sums of UV light. What are you going to do with it? And like you don't need to bother about that. Are you willing to sell? And we were able to get huge discounts. So we picked up all the inventory and kind of did that. We had, even when the whole UV disinfection thing peaked in terms of a business, we had 70% market share. Where even at that time, I think there were some 50 companies which were making it, like from small neighborhood shops to kind of companies like Godrej were making those products. And we had that. And I think going through that kind of hustle of taking a product to market in that period of time that changed the mindset a lot. And I think one of the biggest thing that changed was the apprehension or fear of seeing a product hit market. I think I still remember when the first, as I said, on 11th of April, when the first lot of Corona ovens were going out in the market, I couldn't sleep that night. I don't think Karthik also slept that night, because you have that as a techie, as a product designer or a developer, right? You have that fear that when it goes to the market, how it will work, whether it will fail, whether there will be challenges, whether it will do what it's supposed to do. And this time we're talking about life and death. So it was even more scary.
There's a lot of room for negative publicity as well, right? Where people,
Yeah.
technically, right, if people have brought these into their homes, they're trusting it to keep them safe and healthy, and then suddenly something malfunctions, now you've got a PR nightmare on your hands, right? Where you,
Correct. I think we were not that attuned to kind of think about PR nightmares and all, but just the product failing, right? And some like kind of any kind of accident happening with the user or the customer and all of those things. So I think that was a challenge. And what we have seen is to work with an ecosystem where nobody even knew how to test this product, right? There was no standards, there was no lab which could verify, validate, right? So working with the government to create those standards, to kind of make, and people were doing random shit, right? People were just putting one UV light in some random corner of a box and then saying it will disinfect.
oh, so there were other people who were sort of exploring this as well?
So there were hundreds when we launched, right? And customers really wanted this product. So they were, as I said, from neighborhood shops to large companies jumped into it, right? And they were doing randomly whatever they could, right? Just buying any LED UV light, not even a UV tube light, which is the most efficient one. The UV LEDs don't work in this case. But people didn't know and some people even went to the extent that they just put a blue light in the box to give it a feel of a UV light, so that the customer thinks it's UV and they bought it because it was cheap. So all of that stuff was happening. And then, so we worked with the labs and with the government to kind of bring in standards and testing protocols to say that, okay, yeah, this is a verified product and this actually kills those viruses. And the problem was that the virus was also unknown, right? We didn't know about COVID-19 as much as we know today, right? So nobody wanted to touch it. Nobody wanted to do any experiments on it, right? Everybody was super fearful. So all of those, operating in between all of those challenges, I think that changed the mindset quite a bit.
Okay. Was there any part of you though at that point, you've sort of cracked this one cool product that's actually generating revenue for the company? Presumably your investors are excited as well. Like, wow, these guys have actually done something that's, commercializable, right? Was there a part of you that thought, like, let's just do this? Like, forget about aluminum fuel cells, forget about EVs, forget about all this other stuff. Let's just become a Corona oven company.
No, not at all. No. I don't think that. Not at all. While our investors were not really excited, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they saw it as a distraction.
Ah, okay.
And I still remember kind of standing up in one of the meetings and really putting my feet down and saying that I am not willing to kind of let 20 people, at a time we were a very small team, right? 20, 25 people, team who are really good at creating products, good engineers and researchers and scientists, sit on their asses for the entire lockdown. I'm not willing to do that. And you can go and sue me if you want, but we're doing this.
Wow.
Right. And now in the hindsight, they would all clap.
Because you did put your foot down. Yeah,
because we did make it work. We did a healthy revenue, and it was not like a product wherein for every penny earned, we were spending $3, right? It was not that case. We were earning a very healthy gross margin, and the entire business was profitable, right? So, and this was from day one, right? Every product we sold, we made a profit. So and it was absolutely cash flow positive in the sense that there was no credit period. We took advances to kind of make product and kind of provide products, even from the government. Imagine that, like government would never pay in advance. We had advance payments from the government to kind of manufacture and sell. So from that perspective, it was a very good business, but it always had a shelf life. That was very, very clear from day one, that it's not going to be a product which will last forever, and it's inherent, right? People need these in the time of emergency. And over time, there are ways to build it into a business, but it's not a mass scale business that way. So that was very clear.
Sure. And there was, you kind of reached that point where you started to see this shelf life starting to get close to expiry, where the pandemic starts to die down after the second wave, right? People are getting back to the way that things used to be. Was it at that point that you guys started looking at getting back into aluminum fuel cells, or had the sort of outlook changed at that point within the company?
I think much earlier, right? So while we were at the peak of Corona one itself, we realized that another 2 quarters it will fizzle out and all of that. But at that time we were no more the same Log9 of 2019, right? We had changed a lot. We had seen manufacturing at scale. We had seen operations. We had seen servicing in the field, and all of that has already happened to us, right? So we're totally different as an organization. And that time we said that. So I still remember, right? I was sitting with Hemant, who was our head of technology. Who is our head of technology now as well, right? So he and I were discussing about the future of aluminum fuel cell and efficiencies and all of those things. And we said that, but as a part of the whole picture, we also have this piece, which is the battery, right? We have created this battery, and also we have now started to backward integrate that battery also by creating more advanced cells for it. And we have, at that time, we had bought a cell line from Ather, right? I don't think many people know this. So Ather had a cell line which they had put up over here to kind of experiment and develop cells in India itself.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Because I know that's kind of how they had started, right? Back in the day, before they even built their scooters, I remember the
batteries.
Batteries, yeah. The co-founder was like, that this is the only thing that's worth focusing on is batteries.
Yeah.
But then eventually...
So battery they still do, right? They make really good battery packs for their two-wheelers, right? But battery pack and cell are two different ball games altogether, right? A battery pack is all about taking cells and putting in very efficient mechanical and electrical architecture on top of it in terms of BMS, in terms of thermal management system, wire harnesses and charging profile systems and all of that, and creating a battery pack. Whereas cell is a very heavy material science, chemistry, fabrication and processing play.
They didn't really have the capability to continue developing.
No, and there was no interest as well, right? Because battery pack was good, and their focus was more on the vehicle side and taking it to the market, and then creating the brand around the two-wheeler, right? Maybe you can ask Tarun more about it, but
sure. But this was right up Log9 Materials alley, because
exactly.
You guys are into the material sciences.
Correct.
And this would actually make a lot of sense. So what they sort of sold you the tech?
Not the tech. No tech, right? Only the machine. Which was there in the R&D lab. So we just bought the machine in the R&D lab, right? And it worked well for us because we didn't have a lot of money at that time, right? So we got it at 25 cents on a dollar, right? So that was really good for us. And then that kind of kickstarted our journey into the lithium-ion space. On the cell side and battery pack, we were anyway able to do from procured cells. So we scaled up both these things, started working with OEMs, with vehicle manufacturers. And so that's how the journey went forward.
So they sold you this machine, which, I mean, just one side thought is that it's crazy that the difference between sort of success in this industry and just not making any progress at all is just a single machine, right? You buy this machine and suddenly your capabilities and what you're able to accomplish goes through the roof, right?
Absolutely.
Without that machine, it's just not possible. I think that's just really interesting because generally in the world of startups, that's not the case, right? If you're building software, you're even building some, simple hardware, usually you can just sort of jugaad it together, right? But in this case, you do need like a specialized machine.
Absolutely. And obviously we didn't have the funds to kind of buy a new one, right? And there were not many places you could buy that from. So that in India for sure, like obviously you can go and pay money outside and import it.
Yeah.
But this machine they had already imported before and it was lying with them. And so I think it was good for them as well. And Tarun was very happy to kind of sell it to us because he could see at least this infra being used in a viable and a tangible manner and not just sitting idle or being scrapped out.
Huh. So Ather sells you this machine, and how quickly are you able to go from, bringing this thing across the city to your location, setting it up, plugging it in, whatever needs to happen, to actually being able to take sort of lithium, which I'm assuming you're sourcing from outside of India, and creating cells?
So interesting story. We didn't make lithium cells on this machine itself. While it was a lithium ion cell line for Ather, we didn't make lithium cells on it. So we said, because what we were gunning for was very high power battery packs. So we needed very high power cells. And what we first developed was supercapacitors on this line. So and that's what we started developing. We saw that, okay, if you do have supercapacitors, you can have very, very high performance. You can probably charge a battery pack in like 1 minute time and even lower and all of that. But as we developed that cell, we realized that no, we have to bring in lithium to increase energy capacity, so range. So you cannot just solve for power, but you have to also solve for energy in this case. And that's how I remember that supercap journey kind of enabled us to create a huge differentiation in the way we do lithium-ion cells. So while Tesla off late started talking about tabless cell technology, I don't know if you have come across that. So in cells, you basically have to correct the current from the electrode into the outer circuit, right? So you have small pieces of metal which are welded on the electrodes, and they take the current out. So
Doesn't it looks kind of just like the lid of the battery?
No. So see, electrodes are like this foils. So like your kitchen foil, right? So, and on which some material is coated. And now this foil is rolled up and put inside a cell in a casing, like in a cylindrical piece, or there are other formats, but let's, for the sake of argument, in a cylindrical tube, you put this roll, this aluminum or whatever metal roll, put it inside. Now you have to connect this metal roll to the external circuit. So what people do is, on this foil, there are small strips of metal which are welded, and those strips are connected to the outer circuit through that lid, right? So that lid is welded to that strip, and that's how kind of it goes, the current flows. But what happens is, when you have this metal strip, there's a limitation on how much current that metal strip can carry. And that kind of limits how fast you can charge or discharge the battery or the cell, right? So what we do is that the future of the technology over there is that instead of the strip, you have that entire foil connected to the outer circuit, and that's called tabless design. So there's no tab. This strip is called a tab. So Tesla started talking about it in 2021. That was when they kind of said that, okay, we would like to kind of pioneer, and not pioneer, but like we would like to introduce tabless design in lithium-ion cells. Whereas supercap industry, because it was always meant to be charged fast, was always on the tabless design, right? So we were always working on the tabless design, and that kind of made give us a very good advancement on the cell tech on the lithium-ion side, because we had that understanding and experience of using a tablet structure rather than a tab-based stuff.
So you're kind of, I mean, to simplify it, you're able to take this supercapacitor technology, or a piece of it, and apply it to the lithium-ion cell.
Yeah. Because it started there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, whereas most cell manufacturers in the lithium-ion space
will copy that tab design itself.
Exactly, which is probably not as efficient.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then there are other stuff. So because we're doing supercapacitors and we wanted to make them more environmentally efficient, so we developed the entire process and know how to do aqueous processing of electrodes. So instead of using very costly organic solvents, we said, why can't we use just water and create processes around that? So that know-how also got transformed into our lithium-ion space.
Yeah. So I know you had bought this sort of, is it a robot? I mean, the cell machine that you bought.
It looks like an oven. It's like
an oven.
It's like a coater, right? Because you have foil going. It's like a printing press.
Okay.
So to speak, right? So it's kind of printing press where you have roll to roll, like a newspaper printing machine, right? So that's one part of the machine. And then once you have printed that newspaper, you have to cut it in strips, and those strips have to be rolled. So there is a rolling machine, winding machine as we call it. So that's another part. So that bunch of different machines which are there required to make a cell.
Sure. So you buy this machine, even though you got it on a discount, it's probably a very expensive purchase for the company. You're generating still probably a bit of money from the Corona oven line of business, but like how are you guys doing financially at that point? Was it sort of like, okay, we need to think about what's our next like commercializable product, or were you guys okay?
So one thing was that urge or that itch to have a commercial product out there as soon as possible was exponentially higher, or was far higher than 2019.
Because you've gotten a taste.
Yeah, we have tasted the blood. We have tasted blood now, right? So that was very clear. But one thing that happened in 2021 was that, 2020, entire year of salaries in 2020, we didn't have to touch our equity money. We paid it by Corona 1 profits. So for the entire year, we were able to kind of pass the entire pandemic era without losing any capital that we had raised in 2019. So that was really good for the company for sustenance, and then taking other more long-term tangible products to the market.
So you still had like a couple million in the bank,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah. So we had that money available to us. And then, so we said that, okay, this battery pack that we created for aluminum fuel cell, it had a direct application in 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers. And so started kind of doing prototypes. We actually wanted to do 2-wheeler first. But then what happened was, so our head of product, which is Ankush, right? So randomly one night, we got a 3-wheeler from a company, and it just came in. It was a really fascinating vehicle because it's all yellow. So he's like, I'm not going home unless I put a 2-wheeler battery in it and try to run it. What the worst can happen, right? So he just took out the battery that we designed for the 2-wheeler and put it on a 3-wheeler. And because our batteries were really high power, it could run it. And we had a prototype of a 3-wheeler running with a battery in 30 minutes.
Wow.
So that actually kind of expedited the journey into launching in 3-wheelers. And then it was very quick. So we gave out OEM samples within 2 months kind of a time period, started the approval process. And in less than I think 9-10 months time, we started set up manufacturing for those battery packs, and started selling out products. And and that was in December 2021. So December 21, we were already ready to kind of sell out battery packs for 3-wheelers. And by March of 2022, our 3-wheeler battery packs were already number 2 on the leadership board in the market, in the 3-wheeler category. So OSM, Omega Seki Mobility, is our partner, right? So they were also a new OEM and just scaling up. When we started with them in December, they were doing 40 3-wheelers a month. By March, they were doing 300. And by April, May, they had taken over Mahindra in monthly sales volume. So because the propositions was so awesome, right? As compared to a 3-wheeler taking 3-4 hours charging time, we offered 30 minutes, right? And as compared to that battery having a 2-year life and not even delivering that, we offered a battery with more than 15 years of life with a warranty of 6 years, unlimited number of kilometers. So no matter how much you run it, your warranty would not get voided. And at the same time with very high load bearing capacity, reliability, and all of that built into it. And safety, more than anything else, it was the safest battery pack out there.
That's incredible. That is true disruption, right?
Yeah.
3 hours to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That's massive. Was it mainly regular, everyday individual consumers that were purchasing a lot of these 3-wheelers, or was it mainly fleet operators that are buying in bulk?
Fleet operators. So these are majorly fleet operators, and these are 3-wheeler cargo vehicles. Right? So that's what we started with, and that's where we got scale, and they could do multiple shifts. So that was the motivation for them.
I'm a little scared to ask this question because we risk like moving too deep into the technology, but I'm just curious. Like, how is it that you're like, was it the supercapacitor sort of tech that you implemented in the lithium ion cells that was the big differentiator where you go from 3 hours to 30 minutes? Or,
no, so
because I'm shocked that the other existing players hadn't already figured this technology out.
Yeah, so I think so as we were creating this battery bank for aluminum fuel cell, right? So we had 2 options for creating a very high power and long life battery pack. One was supercapacitors and the other was LTO, the lithium titanate lithium ion battery pack, right? LTO is a chemistry which has been available in the world. It has not taken up that much traction, but it's a very powerful chemistry. You can charge it, discharge it very quickly. It has a very long life. And what we realized was that given LTO is available and it is there, supercap doesn't make any sense. It's too low on energy that it really is not valuable, right? It will not be able to scale. So LTO was a choice, and then that LTO cell helped us kind of create a battery pack which could scale and then give all these features. One thing that we realized in this process is that a lot of times in India, We neglect solutions and technologies because they could not work in other geographies, not realizing that our requirements and our needs are different as compared to what works in US, Europe, China, or whatever other places, right? And that's the reason we were able to make a difference, right? We said, okay, it might not have scaled over there because their requirements were very different, but we need something which can work consistently in very high temperatures. We need something which can be charged very quickly. We need something which can take heavy duty usage. We abuse our vehicles, like literally abuse, and especially in the commercial segment, we abuse vehicles left, right, and center. So it has to be a battery which is very reliable, resilient, safe, is okay being abused, and at the same time offers you very high power and can be charged quickly and life and all of those things. So that's how it kind of happened, and we went into the LTO, and we still are a pioneer in terms of launching and bringing LTO into the Indian market and making it mainstream, right? And I'll tell you a very interesting fact. For the entire period between mid of 2020, where we were sure that we were going ahead and will be launching these battery packs in the market, to April of 22, we didn't, not even in a single place, we disclosed that it was an LTO battery. And the reason was that we didn't want the prejudice of LTO not working in other markets to kind of plague its deployment in India.
Wow. So you kept it under wraps. You were just like,
Yeah.
we've developed something cool. You can charge your battery in 30 minutes instead of 3 hours. Don't worry about the tech. It just works.
Yeah, and we let people assume whatever they wanted to assume. Somebody assumed it's an aluminum battery. Somebody assumed it's a supercapacitor. Somebody assumed it's a hybrid, some lithium supercapacitor hybrid, like you also said right now. And so we didn't correct them, but we didn't also confirm them. So people were making their own presumptions, and that kind of worked. And then the last version of our day zero, right? We kind of announced that, okay, this is an LTO battery pack, and this is how we are making it better, and this is a roadmap going forward. So that's when people got to know, okay, this is what the underlying tech is.
Wow. It just blows my mind, though, that the difference between this highly disruptive technology that you guys built and what the competitors were building, right? These sort of legacy players, it's just a matter of thinking outside the box, right? That's all it really took. And I think a lot of the, like you said, like a lot of the time Indians or anyone really, like we just look and see what other people are doing.
True.
And we assume that, okay, they're doing that for a reason. We need to follow what they're doing, right?
Yeah, people think that they would know better, right? But they might know better for their circumstances. They necessarily don't know better for your circumstances. And that's where the problem lies.
Yeah. And meanwhile, there's this sort of little company based out of Bengaluru that's sort of innovating and thinking, okay, there's like this technology gap here that nobody else seems to have identified. Let's just build that tech. And then suddenly you become, I don't know where you are in the market right now when it cocomes to three-wheelers. Like, where do you stand as compared to the...
So we have 20% market share in the three-wheeler cargo segment, right? And this happened in less than a year's time.
Incredible.
Right. And by the next financial year, FY24, we will be at least at 40% market share. And now we have two-wheelers, we have four-wheelers, and bus truck applications coming in. So it will be widespread across vehicle segments.
Wow. So they just didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I say small Bengaluru-based startup, but really I think things have changed quite a bit again since we last talked. Because I remember, like, I could probably have pointed out each of your employees, within that space. It was like your old office. How big are you guys right now?
So we have more than 600 people now.
They're huge.
At that time, when we met last, I think we were 25 people. So it has really grown in that sense. Out of the 600 people, maybe 650 now, and we have around 300 people who are in full-time roles. So across R&D, across product development, to operations, sales, business development.
Amazing. And it started with the three-wheeler and that one day where you guys decided to just hack this thing together, and it worked.
Yeah.
And then what was the step from there to two-wheelers? You had mentioned that you guys were already working on that in parallel. Was it soon after the launch of this?
So two-wheeler had been a jinxed product for us so far, like while we now have scale on that, but it took much, much longer than expected. And there were multiple things. One is that the two-wheeler platform for commercial applications, right, is something which has not been done right in the country, right? People had really not put in the effort to make the right product for a delivery application, like a food delivery or a e-commerce delivery. And that's what we were targeting, right? A long life battery is more valuable for a B2B operation rather than a B2C where it is not used enough.
Fleets of two-wheelers like
Swiggy,
Dunzo,
Zomato, Dunzo, whatever, Zepto, whatever, like all of these e-com companies, right? So that is where these two-wheelers were supposed to be used, and the platforms really were not very tangible, and so that was one problem. The second problem was that moment we were just ready to launch, and second one was that like the three-wheeler we were just able to, like out of luck I would say, or I don't know what, but we were just able to move faster. The urge to go to market was equally or more so in our partner OSM. To kind of that fire in the belly was really there to kind of work together and kind of do those hacks and do whatever it needed to kind of take the product to market as fast as possible. So it was an equally burning requirement on both sides. So that's why it happened much faster. And then as we were going to launch two-wheelers also, then all the fires started to happen, right? So we have seen n number of fires last year, right? And as those fires started to happen,
just for clarity, like basically the electric two-wheelers that
correct,
Indian companies were manufacturing were literally catching on fire.
Yeah.
You leave them out in the sun and they just start burning.
correct,
Yeah.
right? So and we had n number of cases of that, and people even died in many of those accidents, right? So what happened with that was that our batteries were there for approval and certification, and there was almost a complete embargo on any new certifications of two-wheeler batteries.
This was after you guys had tried to get certification, or
Yeah, when it was in the process of getting certified, and this is like mid last year,
which is really bad luck.
which is really bad luck, right? So it's there. It is the safest battery out there. Like we had really proven it that you can literally throw it in open flame and it will not catch fire. And no matter what you do with it, you drill through the cells, you kind of cut it, you kind of throw it from a rooftop, it will not catch fire. You burn it and like you really put in a furnace and try to burn it, will not catch fire. So, but the point is that if the certification is just not coming through for anybody, like you are part of that gang. And why that happened was because the fires were happening. So the government was trying to figure out how to make corrections in the ecosystem. So they were working on new standards and they were constantly with us as well, but our packs couldn't get cleared off. So that kind of delayed the entire two-wheeler launch for at least good 3-4 quarters. And then finally in January, we were able to get the certification and we started rolling them out.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
I remember seeing your newsletter, I think all the way back in, it must have been sometime in 2020 or 2021, where you guys announced this technology. It's like a prototype and you're testing it out with different, these businesses, like for example, the delivery, I think.
Correct.
I'm not sure which of the companies you had started piloting this with, but yeah, it seemed like it was just around the corner. And then I remember every month reading the newsletter and I'm like, wait, what happened with the two-wheelers? Like, why isn't this actually them taken to this to market? And now I understand why. It was because of this.
And especially in the two-wheeler side, the specs were even better because there was no charging infra constraint, right? So our three-wheeler batteries can also be charged in 10 minutes, but we offer 30 minutes because then if you have to charge in 10 minutes, then you have to kind of put up a proprietary charger, right? And that we didn't want to do. It has to be on public charging infra. But a two-wheeler on a public charging and fast public charging infra can be charged in 12 minutes. So it was even more compelling in terms of value prop and all of those things. But yeah, this happened.
Got it. I know, I remember during our first conversation in 2019, you were talking about the early days and how it was basically like sort of like a shed or a warehouse that your family owned and you set everything up in there. It was in that warehouse was the day that you sort of started, right? Day zero. It would have been April 21st of, was it 2015?
2015, yeah.
And now here we are, like, what is it? Eight years later?
8 years later, yeah.
Wow. And again, you're celebrating this thing, which you guys have created now, this concept of the event Day Zero, right? Which I think last year, 2022, was the first time that you celebrated it, April 21st, 2022. Now you guys are doing it again. Presumably, you're going to be sort of talking about some new things that you've been working on, maybe things that you've kept under wraps. I don't know what you're like allowed to tell me and what you're keeping confidential for the day of the event. Because this conversation will go live before the event happens. But maybe just fill me in on the things that you can tell me about?
Yeah, so actually the concept of day zero came in last year, right? And what we wanted to do was kind of really build in public and hold ourselves accountable in the public perception, that's saying that, okay, we're committing to something and we'll come back next year and give you an update and tell you more about what we're going to do in the next 12 months. So that's how the concept day zero came in, and we call it day zero because we didn't want to say, okay, we have already moved this distance and we moved this distance, but rather like looking at climbing peaks. So you climb one peak and you set your eyes towards the next peak. So that was the whole concept of day zero. So last year the biggest announcement that we made last year was to set up India's largest cell manufacturing facility, and not just India's largest, but Southeast Asia's largest cell manufacturing facility. And we hosted it in a place or in our head office where it was about to come up. So people are really sitting on that piece of land where that facility was going to show up in 12 months' time.
Was it just like sort of dirt at that point? Like
it was a shed.
You had a shed. Okay.
It was a shed. It was covered.
Sort of like a skeleton of what would eventually.
Yeah. So it was a shed, and we were inside that shed, but it was like just open. Like it was just a hall, right, and nothing inside. And that's where we hosted our day zero, first day zero, so to speak, the event in 2022. And now this 21st of April, day 023, it's already ready. It's got to get inaugurated, and Southeast Asia will have its first cell manufacturing line.
Wow, that's huge. The fact that it's the largest in Southeast Asia is just an incredible achievement. And I think a testament to, again, how far you guys have come to becoming like an extremely, because I remember like when we sat down last time, like you guys were still working on the aluminum fuel cell. Not to say that you aren't still, right? You're still working on that, probably more stealthily, like just sort of behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But at that time, I think it was, there was a lot of debate. I remember reading through the comments on YouTube, and people are like, these guys are never going to make it. Like, this is like too futuristic technology. It's never going to work. And now, right, 2023, it's just incredible to see that you are now like a highly respected and recognized player in this space, a company to be reckoned with, right? You're actually like taking on giants, like you're talking about Mahindra, and how you are going to probably end up reaching 40% market share in that electric three-wheeler space. Like that's a huge accomplishment. And I'm sure Mahindra and other big players are sort of sweating, right? They're like, "Oh gosh, like how did we miss this?" Like
we don't see them as competitors. I think as a battery player, you can supply to anybody.
Fair enough. But yeah, I just think it's so cool that you guys have come such a long way, and I can't wait to see where things go from here. That was Akshay Singhal, founder of Log9 Materials. And by the way, for anyone wondering whether the recent discovery of lithium reserves in Jammu and Kashmir is going to affect Log9, Akshay is pretty sure that it's going to take a while before it has any meaningful impact on their business.
It's easily a 5 to 7 year process before you get there, because today it's nothing more than an inferred reserve. So there's a difference between an inferred reserve and an actual reserve. Right, so there's there's a huge amount of estimation which is gone in saying that, okay, this is the size of the reserve and this is how much would potentially be extractable. But then when you finally go and do more surveys and do more analysis, and you find the actual tangibility of that reserve, that still needs to happen.
Sure, but also very scary to start setting stuff up in such a dangerous part of the country.
It's a beautiful part though.
Oh yeah, no doubt about that. Thank you so much for watching or listening to the show this week, and I'll catch you in the next one.